Hey guys, can you hear me now?
Hey, yes, can. Sorry about that.
That was weird.
That was bizarre. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Definitely.
My name's Rob. Your name is?
Tom,
Tom. Good to meet you. Good
nice,
afternoon.
nice to meet you too.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah, you have a little history with Cliff.
Yep, done a few debates.
Right on. Glad to hear that. Just to start off, I thought we would just lay kind of the principles for the conversation today. The topic is, where is the evidence that God exists? I think it is a little bit revisiting what you guys had debated beforehand, but I wanted to, first of all, just thank you, Tom, TJump, for jumping on here with us. Do you mind just talking a little bit about your channel, what you do, how you came to the conclusion that you did, and then I'll ask Cliff with give me an answer as well.
Sure. So I run a YouTube channel where I debate with professors, philosophers, and theists about reasons to believe in a God, flat Earth, science stuff. Yeah, the reason I'm an atheist is because of the reason that most academics in pretty much every academic field is an atheist, is because there is no evidence that actually indicates the existence of a God. The consensus in every academic field is that it doesn't. And because each line of evidence from each field has been vetted and does not stand up to the level of evidence that the field itself requires for a thing to count as evidence. So just like the historical accounts of any miracle are not accepted in any textbook, it's not accepted in the New Testament, and the historical accounts are considered to be mostly made up. All of the matriarchs and patriarchs from the Old Testament are considered to be pretty much fabricated. Moses didn't exist. Abraham, Isaac, Cain, and Abel didn't exist. No archaeological evidence of Moses. Moses probably didn't exist. So, and the same is true every academic field. In cosmology, Big Bang, naturalistic explanation of the universe is the one that's accepted by most cosmologists. No free will is pretty much universally accepted in neurology, psychology, neuroscience. So we're not really, there's no blameworthy, no soul, none of that could have done otherwise stuff. So in the same is true of every single field. Biology, information is in the cell. It's purely naturalistic. No mind, no intelligent design, no fine tuning of the universe. In cosmology, the consensus is fine tuning is again not explained by a God. So in literally every field, the evidence shows that the explanations Christians use do not work in under any circumstances any more than any other made up religion.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing, Tom, on that. I'm going to hand it over to Cliff to make your introduction.
Thank you, Robert. TJump, good to see you again, man. I am convinced that God loves TJump, Robert, myself, that God loves every single one of us. Of course, that implies that I believe there is a God. I'm convinced that there is a God because I experience free will. I experience self-determination, and I'm convinced that there is no God. What a person is doing who says that is they're limiting reality to matter and energy. And if there is no God and there is simply matter and energy, then we are determined. But my experience and observation in life is that we have free will. In fact, the person who says to me that we are determined, I'm going to ask them, really, were you determined to say that we are determined? It reduces itself to idiocy for me. So clearly the issue of self-determination and free will points us to the fact that reality is bigger than simple matter and energy. Now, often a person says to me, well, science doesn't prove God exists. In fact, science disproves God's existence. That is totally dishonest intellectually. Obviously, the whole question of God is the question of, is there a transcendent being outside of the universe who created the universe? Which means it is absolutely impossible for me to say, scientifically, I can prove God. Equally true, it's totally impossible for anybody to say, science disproves God. The question of God is not a scientific question. And there are many fields of knowledge that are not scientifically determined. The idea that science is the only way to ascertain truth is a belief. It's a philosophy. It's a worldview. It's backed up by no evidence. It is blind faith. Obviously, the idea that math and logic are good cannot be scientifically proven, and yet we use math and logic all the time. Obviously, the idea that I had an experience yesterday, I had an experience a year ago that I can remember, is not scientifically verifiable. So the whole idea that unless I can prove something scientifically, it's not true, is a blind leap of faith. I'm convinced God exists because order and design indeed does point to a designer in every one of my observations of reality, but obviously the designer cannot be scientifically verified. That is why the whole idea that, oh, well, just perform a miracle, God, right now, and then I'll believe in you, is preposterous. Totally preposterous. Why? Because God is not subject to scientific laws. And if I'm going to simply say, God, you have to do this, my science will not allow me to accept that as a miracle. Why? Because science naturally asks the question, what is the natural explanation for this? Now, when it comes to thinking people in all the different areas of academia that believe in Christ, it's tremendous. Tremendous. So there are biologists, chemists, zoologists, cosmologists, Dr. Francis Collins, head of the NIH. I mean, the list goes on and on at Harvard, at Stanford, at MIT. Many, many followers of Christ, believers in God, believers in Christ. In fact, if you go to MIT and you look at all the list on the around the buildings of the people who were key to the development of MIT as one of the finest institutions of higher learning in the world, over 50% of those listed are theists. They believe in some type of God. And most of those theists happen to be followers of Christ. So the idea that people in academia are not followers of Christ is preposterous. Obviously, there are many atheists in academia, but there are many theists and there are many Christians as well. So I think when you look at reality, you've got to acknowledge that there is solid evidence that indeed there is some type of God. And then when you read the historical Gospels, the overwhelming evidence is Jesus Christ is reliable, and that's why faith in him is so wise.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Cliff. I wanted to host this topic in particular because I think that this is such a clear topic for us that is crucial to have dialogue and discussions around, because what greater idea is there than that the universe is comprehensible? That we can comprehend the universe, that we can make distinctions between what is imaginary and what is real. And the idea that there is a maker behind the universe, well, that's the greatest idea ever in a way, right? So this discussion that we're going to have today between theism and atheism is a very relevant one to our times, but is one in which countless people have debated and discussed. It seems that we are taking right now at the beginning a look at it through the lens of morality, ethics, science, personal experience, and then later on we'll get to obviously TJump. Maybe you hold to the Humanist Manifesto #3 that was written in or revised back in 2003. Obviously, Cliff is coming from a biblical perspective. So maybe we can have that discussion at the end, but up front, I thought TJump, maybe you could share on why you hold to the atheist position. Is there an experience in your life that led you to that, or what observations have you made that led you to that conclusion that there is no God?
Well, I don't know anything about the Humanist Manifesto, so I can't really comment on that. Like I said in the beginning, the reason atheism is true is because all the evidence indicates it. There is no evidence for theism any more than there's evidence for Santa Claus or fairies, which is why the academic consensus, which means the overwhelming majority of in academia, show that the accepted position based on the evidence is that not God. That doesn't mean there aren't theists in academia. Of course there are, and there are also Jains and Hindus and there are people in academia who believe in very silly things all the time. There are a small minority of climate scientists who reject climate change. There are people who have crazy theories and publish the papers all the time. That's perfectly fine in academia, but that's not what is evidence. Evidence is the consensus, the majority, the people who've looked at the evidence and evaluated, yes, this is a solid piece of evidence. And every time we find the theistic ones that are published fail every single time, 100%, every field they're not accepted by the consensus because they don't work. So yes, there are obviously theists in academia, but that's not evidence for it being true. Everything is better explained by naturalism. Absolutely everything. There's nothing about that Cliff mentioned that is better explained by a God. Like math and logic, perfectly explained under naturalism. Like I don't even know why he thinks they're not. It's pretty simple to explain them, actually. It's like, we exist, I think, therefore I am. I have a experience of this world, and I can describe the things I see with numbers and letters. So I can say, there is one TV, there is one camera. Oh, I got math. I can say I am myself and not myself. I got logic. So all of math and logic just follows from those things. They're just descriptions of what we experience in the world. There's nothing more than that. They're descriptions of reality. They're not, math and logic are not magical in any way. They're languages just like English, and they have the same properties as English. So math has sentences that describe reality, correspond to reality, sentences that don't correspond to reality, and sentences that are self-contradictory. English has sentences that describe reality, correspond to reality, sentences that don't correspond to reality, and sentences that are self-contradictory. For example, I am a human corresponds to reality. I am a Klingon from Star Trek does not correspond to reality. And I am a married bachelor is self-contradictory. In math, you have 1 + 1 = 2 corresponds to reality. 1 + 1 = 7 is self-contradictory. And F = ma times 45 or something is something that does not correspond to reality. So math is essentially no different than English. We just cherry pick the versions of math that describe reality accurately and say, look how amazing math is. Well, we can do the same thing with English. Like, look, there's a tree. That sentence really well describes reality. Does that mean that English is somehow magical, created by a super powerful being? Like, well, no, it's just a sentence we made up to describe the things that exist. So there wasn't really anything in what Cliff said that's evidence. And I don't support scientism. Like I never said science is the only way to learn anything. I just said we need a way to differentiate imagination from reality, and science, the reasonable way we do, does not in any way indicate a God. And so saying that we have a reason to believe in a God that has no evidence for it is like saying we have a reason to believe in a transcendental pixie, which we have no evidence for.
Would you like to go respond?
Go ahead.
So we're having this conversation and using language and concepts like mathematics to understand one another. Is it reasonable to conclude that from that dialogue that we're having, as we convey meaning back and forth with one another over concepts such as those equations that you talked about, or the idea that evidence is what we use to distinguish between what is imaginary and what is real, doesn't that point to a mind behind your mind?
No, how would it do that? Like, it's no different than English. Does English indicate there's a mind behind my mind?
Well, I guess what I'm kind of getting at is within science, there's this principle of causality, right? That the effect is not greater than the cause. Okay, so if
I've never heard of that. There's no law of causality as far as I'm aware.
Well, it's a principle within science, all right? So it's what I'm meaning by that is...
I'm pretty familiar with science. I don't know of that principle in science.
Well, okay, so causality, right? So obviously we have this notion of the universe has a beginning.
Sure.
Okay, so if the universe has a beginning, let's think about our experience. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore it has a cause. So this causality, this idea that your mind and my mind are able to convey information between each other, is it more reasonable to say that there is a mind behind all of this? Or is it more reasonable to say that it just is a total accident? It's just totally spontaneous.
So to try and steelman your argument, I think what you're saying is that there are minds in the universe. Is it more reasonable that minds came from no minds, or that there was a mind that existed prior to the universe that created minds in the universe? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Right. People posit, well, this is just a virtual reality that we're living in, a simulation, but that still demands a designer, doesn't it?
No, that's a composition division fallacy. So we have formally proven that is not That is actually a fallacious argument that is not evident. So it's like saying, if we have a whole bunch of, if we have a wall, like if we look at a wall, is it more reasonable to say, well, that wall was created by another wall, or was it created by a bunch of bricks that none of which had a wall? Well, clearly it's more reasonable that it was created by another wall, because how could a wall be there if no wall was there prior? Well, no, that doesn't make sense at all, because you can make a wall with a bunch of bricks, none of which have the property of wall. You just put them together, and if you put them together, you get a wall. It's called an emergent property. There are many things that are emergent properties, like the sun is an emergent property. You take a bunch of hydrogen atoms and helium atoms, you put them together, gravity crushes them, and it creates these nuclear reactions that send light everywhere, and that's a star. The universe wasn't created by a star thing. There doesn't need to be a star prior to the universe to have created this universe to allow for stars. Like, obviously not. Or oceans didn't exist. It's not like the thing that created the universe must be an ocean because we see ocean. So how could an ocean exist if the thing that created it wasn't the ocean? Like, well, no, there's these things called emergent properties that didn't exist prior to the universe and are a result of different combinations of things in the universe, like bricks and the solar system and the earth and trees. Pretty much everything is an emergent property that wasn't there prior. Minds are the same as literally everything else in the universe. There's no reason to think that minds, which as far as we know, we have no evidence existed anywhere prior to a few billion years ago, were in any way a part of the creation of the universe, any more than trees or rocks or stars or oceans. Like, there's no reason to think the exact same evidence that you're using, the argument, would apply to all of those things, and you would have to say that the origin of the universe was created by something that's made of a star and a tree and an ocean and a mind and a rock, because all of those things are here. So how could they have come about by things that weren't oceans or trees or rocks or minds? Like, well, no, that's just a composition division fallacy.
So if I can kind of rephrase or give back to you what you're saying, I think you're saying, right, that in our evolutionary process, we have a conscious desire to look for agency, right? To look for a cause behind everything that we experience. Now, is that just our drive for survival, or is that our drive to possibly get to know, something behind what caused all of this? Why is there something instead of nothing?
Well, that's a different argument. So my argument was the composition division fallacy, and that is the type 1 and type 2 errors fallacy. So that is an argument I definitely make in a different context. But my argument in this one is just saying that there was no mind in the things that make mind. Therefore, it's more reasonable to think that there was a mind prior to the universe. That's a composition division fallacy. So that we know doesn't work.
But it isn't in scientific observation. It would seem that from nothing comes nothing.
Right. No one in physics believes that the universe came from nothing. So we would agree with you there.
Okay. So where does it come from then?
It is like, where does God come from?
Well, I mean, that's what we're discussing.
Well, and where's
the evidence? Where I'm trying to locate it. Where is the evidence for God?
Oh, no. So this is it's a rhetorical question. So it's like saying, who created God from your perspective? Mm-hmm. No one, right? No one created God. God has just always been there. So when you ask us who created the universe or natural reality, we're going to give you the same response. Like, no one created it. It's always been there. There has to have always been something. Like, reality could have never not been reality. So there's always going to be something in reality. And we think that something is a natural something. And we know that our universe had a beginning, but that tells us nothing about the rest of the natural stuff. There's lots of natural stuff that can exist outside of our universe just fine. So the consensus in physics and cosmology and every natural field of science is that there has always been natural stuff. It doesn't have a beginning. It's one of the laws of thermodynamics. It's the first one. Energy cannot be created or destroyed.
But isn't the second law of thermodynamics regarding entropy? I mean, doesn't that show that the universe is not eternal?
No.
That the universe has a beginning?
No. The second law of thermodynamics is that entropy increases, which means workable, usable energy decreases, but the energy is still there. It never goes away. The amount of energy in the universe always stays the same. So the only thing entropy does is showing that our universe has a timeline of when the entropy had a lowest point. So it's like saying the expansion of the universe had a beginning at some point. Does that mean the universe didn't had a beginning? Well, no, it just means it's expanding. There could be things before the expanding or after the expanding. Maybe it's cyclic. There's all kinds of things that could happen. The second law of thermodynamics does not show a beginning to all natural things. It shows a beginning to the expansion of the universe, and that's it. It's like saying I have a beginning to my nail growing or whatever. That's it. It's not particularly fantastic, because the first law of thermodynamics explicitly states energy cannot be created or destroyed. So I mean, that's kind of one of the contingencies that many theists seem to misrepresent, is that the second law doesn't show anything like a beginning to all natural things. It just shows a beginning to the motion, this one particular kind of motion that we've discovered, which is energy.
So then evolution and this process or this study of change over time would then eventually point us to one of two options then. Either the universe is eternal or the universe has a beginning. And if the evidence is pointing towards the universe having a beginning, then doesn't that make it more of a problem for denying the existence of a maker of the universe?
Well, no, because the evidence doesn't point to a universe having a beginning, because the way you're using universe is not the way the physicists use universe. In physics, universe just means our space-time continuum. That's it. It does not mean all space-time. It means our space-time. So our universe had a beginning, but that does not mean that all natural things had a beginning. And the way that most theists use the word universe is they mean all natural things, all physical material things had a beginning, and nothing in physics says that. Nowhere in physics does it say all material things had a beginning. There's no evidence to support that whatsoever. All of the models in physics show that there's a natural thing existing prior to the Big Bang. So when you say our universe had a beginning, sure, absolutely. Does that mean that we had a creator? Absolutely not, because there's another natural thing that's right behind that. There's no evidence for anything other than that. All of the models in physics, I remember there's a quote from Sean Carroll in his debate with William Lane Craig, where he specifically mentioned this. He said, if we were going to poll cosmologists of whether God had anything to do with the creation of the universe, overwhelmingly, they would all say no. It was a beautiful quote from him. So the fact that our universe had a beginning does not indicate that all natural things had a beginning. And so it would not indicate a creator unless you could show all natural things have a beginning.
So then from naturalism and determinism that you are positing here, we don't have concepts such as moral responsibility or individual intrinsic worth coming from a creator, but simply from what we say so.
No.
That's part of the challenge too, though, of what you're saying, though, as far as the universe or natural material doesn't have a beginning, is you're describing this word eternity. And eternity is a concept that we apply only, obviously, to a maker, if you will, a creator, right? Not towards anything else.
Well, two things there. No, eternity would apply to all kinds of things. Like nature was thought to be eternal long before God was thought to be eternal. Like the oldest religions worship nature before God, for sure. But I forget the first thing you said. It was totally forgot. Lost it.
I was just talking about moral responsibility, individual worth.
So most philosophers are atheists. 70-something% are atheists, but most philosophers believe in moral realism, objective morality. So most models of morality do not ground objective morality in a God at all. It's a common misconception that people think you need a God for morality because that's what most people are brought up believing, but it's just not the case. Objective morality is actually better grounded in a non-God. There's tons and tons of philosophical problems, and when you compare the models and you say, well, which one can answer the problems better and can give more consistent answers to the moral dilemmas and can provide answers to the questions we're looking for when we're looking for an objective morality, the God model doesn't actually work. So to use a parallel, again, in the Sean Carroll debate, he said, when we're asking about the fine tuning of the universe, there's a bunch of specific questions we want answered. Like what is the energy density in the space? Why is it that density? How did it come to be that density under these conditions? Why are the laws have this relation between the unification of the laws. These are very specific technical questions that you need to answer to be able to answer what caused the fine tuning. God can't answer those. So it's not even a contender for what caused the fine tuning in physics. The same thing applies to morality. We have very specific questions we're asking. We're asking what is objective morality and how do you ground it? Like, how do you answer the is-ought problem? How do you answer the G.E. Moore's open question argument? How do you answer the Euthyphro dilemma? How do you answer the trolley problem? You need to be able to give specific answers to these based off of your model. And if you can't do that, it's not even a contender for objective morality.
Well,
So
I didn't understand any of those 4 examples you gave. Could you maybe just clarify on what one of those examples argues for or against regarding absolute morals?
so these are problems with morality. We're trying to say, well, what is objective morality? If there is an objective morality, it needs to be able to answer these questions. And so those are just a list of problems, like in the list of problems in physics, like what is the energy density of space? So it's just a list of problems that you need to be able to answer to qualify as a model of objective morality in philosophy. That's it. The Euthyphro dilemma is like saying, is something good because God said it's good, or did God say it's good because it's good for some external reason? That's one of the things, and it would apply not only to a God but any conscious agent.
Well, I would say that if there is such a thing as goodness, there has to be a maximum, a standard outside of that the ultimate good that it's measured by.
I don't know what you mean. So, for example, gravity exists. There isn't like a maximum of gravity. Gravity is objective. Why would it need to have a maximum?
Right, and the speed of light is the same everywhere. What I'm talking about in regards to morality is, if you're going to say something is good, then aren't you going to have a maximum good, a standard to measure that goodness by?
No, like I can say stuff falls. There isn't like a maximum speed of fall. It's a measurement of a thing that exists in the universe. So like I can say that is a triangle. Is there a perfect triangle out there that like exemplifies all possible triangles? No, there's no perfect triangle that exists in the universe. I don't need there to be a perfect triangle. It's just a concept of we take this property and we take it to its extreme.
Well,
So
why do we applaud the archer who hits the target then? Or why do we applaud the football player who gets into the end zone? Because there's a specific target. It's the same with morality, is it not?
No, it's like the target is something we put there. We drew the paint on the touchdown line. We drew the paint on the target, and it's a demonstration of skill is why we applaud that, because it's hard to do. Morality, there is a goal there. There's totally a goal there, but the goal doesn't exist. It's not like the goal is somehow off in the distance and we can get to the goal if we just like traverse enough space or whatever. It's a abstract ideal. So if I have a goal of drawing a perfect triangle, there isn't a perfect triangle that already exists somewhere in the universe. If I actually managed to draw it, it would be the first perfect triangle ever. So you don't need the goal to exist somewhere to have it be an abstract motivator. So morality is like gravity, in my view. It's a law of nature. There isn't a thing that is the perfect thing out there that grounds it like a Platonic object. It is a goal, a hypothetical instantiation of what would happen if we followed this law to its extreme.
I would say there is a perfect triangle and there is a perfect circle. If you look up at the sky, at the stars, if you look for the North Star, and if you look at the Big Dipper and then trace it towards the North Star in the sky, if you look at the North Star is pointing towards true north, which over the course of a calendar year makes a concentric circle, a perfect circle in the sky. And there are certain constellations that have a perfect triangle in them. So I would say that there is an objective standard outside of our own perception, whether it's morality or whether it's scientific observation, where we're saying, yes, truth exists outside of ourselves. So I think maybe, well, that's just part of my perspective on it. Do you have another perspective you want to add to it?
Sure. I mean, TJump, it seems to me you're making one of the classic mistakes that I warned about at the beginning. You are driving everything back to material reality, which is basically a statement that science, the observation of the physical, is the way we determine all of reality. Therefore, you're in a real quagmire when it comes to the question of God, because you can't use physical reality to prove that God exists. You can't use physical reality to disprove God exists. Why? Because God is beyond the physical. And that's why when you appeal to cosmologists and biologists and chemists and their science, and how these people say there is no God to explain it, you're making a huge philosophical mistake, sir. And that mistake is you're assuming that a transcendent being, God, who is outside of the universe, either has to be physically proven, scientifically proven, or he does not exist. Sir, that is a humongous logical error. It's not true at all. And I think some of the issues that Robert has been raising are very legitimate. TJump, there is a qualitative difference between the law of gravity, between the laws of science, and saying that to step on an insect is permissible, but to step on a human baby is evil. There is a qualitative difference. And that difference is when you make a moral statement, you are appealing to something that is non-physical. You're appealing to a standard of justice. You're appealing to the dignity of a human life that cannot be biologically, chemically, astronomically determined. Rather, you have to go into the area of philosophy, into the area of theology. And then you've got to determine, if I believe that all of reality is matter and energy, then no, that baby doesn't have any more value than a roach or a termite. Why? Because reality is what is. So what is. And when you start making moral statements like to step on a roach is okay, but to step on a baby is evil, you are so far out of physical reality. It's incredible. You're talking about good and evil as metaphysical entities that do not have anything to do with scientific inquiry. So come on, look at life, observe life. You don't go on a scientific date, TJump. Your relationships with your friends, with your family members are not based on science. They're based on trust, on credibility, on integrity. That's what it's based on. It's not based on cramming it into a bottom of a test tube. So come on, think about it. Allow reality to be a lot bigger than simply a scientific equation.
Oh yeah, I never said anything about scientism. I never said science was the only.
I know, but that's your whole argument has been that.
No, it's not.
Yes, you're always going back to what scientists say.
No, so it's basic.
Then correct me. Show me how you're thinking it through.
So this is basic philosophy. We say that if X exists, there should be evidence of X. I can show there's no evidence of X here, no evidence of X here, no evidence of X here. That means, so none of those areas have evidence of X. That means you need to provide a different area that has evidence of X. So I'm not saying that God doesn't exist because there's no evidence in these areas that we have lots and lots of evidence of other things. I'm saying that these areas don't provide evidence that your thing exists, so you need to provide some other kind of evidence. So this isn't saying that science is the only way to know anything. I never said that anywhere in any of my statement. All I'm doing is using these as an example. I can say, you say there's pixies. Well, there's no pixie here. I don't see a pixie. There's no pixie here. All the places we've looked, we don't see pixies. Where is your evidence of pixies? Because I can't find it. I've looked everywhere I can look.
Example you've given once again, T-Jump. That's where you always go. You always go right back to the physical. There's not a pixie over here, so there's no pixie. All right, I'm still outside of the physical.
So I'm still explaining here. So I'm saying that you say there is this thing, pixies, and I'm saying, okay, where is the evidence of pixies? Because I've looked everywhere I can look, and I can't find the evidence for pixies.
You're never going to see God.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. That's cool. But you need to show me. You need to show me where the evidence is, because I can't find it. I've looked everywhere I can look.
Right. Okay. So knowledge doesn't come just through the five senses. So I think we can hold to some of the most important things in this life. What is visible rests upon what is invisible. Magnetism, electricity. You mentioned gravity. Atom.
Those all come from the senses.
So on and so forth. How do they come from the senses?
Indirect observation. So we say that if there's an electron that has these properties, and we have this tool that can affect these things and shoot it into a wall, it'll have this effect by moving the other particles in this way. We do the experiment and say, look, we've observed that there is an electron there. That's how we've discovered neutrinos and most particles. You don't need to directly observe them. You can observe a consequence of them. That is still evidence of our experiences.
Okay, so you're saying that there is indirect observation of those natural phenomena. So when we're talking about some of these discoveries in cosmology and discussion around ethics, can we not make indirect observations about some of those discoveries and then conclude, yeah, it is most likely probable that there is a God?
Well, we could definitely make indirect observations of a god for sure. There's many examples I could list that could count, but we haven't seen any. So that's like if you have indirect observations of a god, that would be empirical evidence of a god. Absolutely. I don't know of any cases that you do, but definitely it's possible.
So if you were to wake up tomorrow morning and there was a cloud that said, "Hi, it's me, comma, God," then you would say, "Oh, well, then that must be evidence that there is a God."
Well, you need novel testable predictions just because like clouds can be produced by a guy in a plane who can write words or whatever. But you'd say if there is a God, then God will write in the sky, "Hi, I am your God," in the next 5 minutes or whatever. And in the next 5 minutes, if it shows up, yes, that would be evidence of a God.
Wouldn't you be suspicious of collusion, though? That it's just a one big kind of um, conspiracy to get more power to one group? I mean, I think that isn't. Have you ever seen the movie The Truman Show?
Yes,
Scary.
but that's the point of the novel testable predictions. Like if you can make consistent novel testable predictions, that breaks the collusion bond. It means it's more likely that your hypothesis is true than that conclusion is true, because having collusion that can make testable predictions about the universe when we don't control the universe is very impressive. That's why we consider novel testable predictions to be the highest form of evidence. So if you can make novel testable predictions about your God, that is evidence of your God. It may not be sufficient to prove your God exists, but it is definitely evidence.
Right. So we're staying away from the God of the Bible right now. We're just talking about existence for the maker of the universe.
Yeah, that was perfectly fine. You could
Right.
say anything you wanted to. If you make testable
So-
predictions, then it's evidence of your hypothesis, whatever your hypothesis is.
Right. And so what we're kind of discussing here right now is morality, this idea that there is such a thing as a universal moral absolute, such as, for example, do not murder. Like, don't murder. It just doesn't help with the survival of the species, but it also has some form of stabilizing effect on societies. Why is that programmed within us? Is that just an evolutionary process? And even if so, does that not point towards a life giver behind that moral absolute?
Well, no. So again, I agree with what Cliff said that this is an area of philosophy. So we have to look at the evidence from philosophy here. And the evidence from philosophy is that, well, no, the natural explanations are still better. Like, as I mentioned earlier, 70 something% of philosophers are atheists from the Phil Surveys paper, the largest survey of philosophers ever done, which they're doing another one this year, which is really cool. But and the majority of them are atheists. Majority of them are moral realists and atheists. So it's not the case that you need a mind to ground these things, just like it's not the case that you need a mind to ground gravity. It's a law of nature. And when Cliff said we're appealing to a non-physical thing here, well, that's just false. Like moral naturalism, there's a Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, moral naturalism. It lists exactly what the position is. Metaphysical naturalism, that moral facts are natural facts. Epistemic naturalism, we know moral claims are true in the same way that we know claims in the natural sciences are true. And analytic naturalism, our moral claims are synonymous with certain highly complex claims in the natural sciences. So all of these are just technical terms in philosophy that we already just reject Cliff's position. Like, no, these are not non-physical things in philosophy. These are physical things. We're just describing parts of nature that are objective, just like gravity. It's not the case that we're going for non-physical things here in most of philosophy.
Can you show me a foot of justice? Can you show me a pound of love?
Can you show me a pound of fitness or a pound of health?
I sure can.
Please do. Show me a pound of fitness.
I'll show you a human being who's in very good shape. They're fit. I'll show you a human being, a body that's very healthy, and they don't have cancer, and they're not dying. They don't have COVID-19. They're alive.
That is
justice. The value of love is totally intangible.
So that is a thing that is fit. So I can show you a thing, a moral action. Like I can help an old lady across the street, that's a moral action, but that's not showing you a pound of morality. Just like saying, here is a thing that is fit is not showing you a pound of fitness. They're called abstract nouns as opposed to concrete nouns. It's literally impossible to show a pound of an abstract noun. Like, could you show a pound of capitalism? No. Could you show a city that is a capitalistic city? Yes.
Yes, we agree.
So the same thing applies to morality. Morality has abstract nouns and concrete examples, just like any other physical thing like capitalism or fitness or health or stars. Like, all abstract nouns work this way. So I can show you an example of a moral action, but you're not going to have a pound of morality, just like you're not going to have a pound of capitalism or a pound of fitness.
Correct. We obviously agree on that. No problem there. But you were repeatedly going back to physical evidence. You cannot do that with justice, with love, with kindness and mercy. Those are intangible values, and either they're relative, either they're created by the human mind, or they're not. But TJump, I think it's real clear that based on your worldview, you have to buy into determinism, don't you? We're all determined, right?
Well, no, there's actually
By our
many
process, by chemical, by our environment, we just are determined.
Well, there's actually many non-deterministic views on.
I didn't ask about that, TJump. I asked what you believe. Now, please stop talking about the theoretical. All right, tell us.
Well,
we're real personal with you. Okay,
Cliff,
what you believe.
Cliff,
now,
you
please
asked.
Tell us what you believe.
Cliff, you asked, do you have to adopt determinism? The answer is no. I do not have to adopt determinism. There are.
Tell me what you believe. What does TJump
yes,
believe?
I am a determinist. I believe that determinism is the only viable option. Everything is either done for reasons, in which case it's determined by those reasons, or it's done for no reason, in which case it's random. And those are the only two possibilities that are possible.
Okay, then what you just said was determined.
Or random, yes.
So what is the point of this conversation? Do you honestly believe that you don't freely formulate your own ideas? You honestly believe that everything that you say has been determined by your genetic code and by the influences of your environment. You honestly believe that?
Yes, and that I don't understand why you think that makes it any less meaningful.
Because you know very, very well that you don't have to respect me. You can be highly disrespectful. You know that you don't have to love. You choose to love. You know very well that when it comes to meaning in life and when it comes to ethics, you don't believe that someone has to murder or that someone has to sacrifice their life for someone else. You know very well that someone doesn't have to cheat on their IRS.
Well, Cliff, you keep saying that you know.
Honest and forthright, or they can choose to cheat.
Well, Cliff.
You know that that's why you hold people responsible for what they do.
Cliff, could you stop saying you know? Cliff,
do not buy into the lie that I had to do it because my genetic makeup made me do it, or because my environment made me do it.
Cliff, you straw man me like 10 times in a row here. Cliff, no, none of the
I'm
times
not straw manning you at all.
Yes, you are.
I'm simply saying that if determinism is true, these are the logical implications. I don't know what you believe because you are very reticent, TJump, to be open and honest with me and vulnerable. You like to hide behind the majority of atheists or the majority of scientists or the majority of this people, and that's the consent.
Cliff, you keep misrepresenting my position. I'd like to get in here to try and correct your misrepresentations.
You need to know what you think and why you think it. That's what we're asking.
Cliff, so every time you said you know, you were wrong. So every single time I can give you actual provable examples where that is exactly wrong. So every time you said you know, you just don't know science here. So when you said you know that people don't kill, they choose to kill or whatever. Well, no, that's actually false. We have literally shown that that's false. Many people, we have examples of where, like the Texas sharpshooter had a tumor in his brain. He didn't choose to kill. He killed because he had a tumor in his brain. We have many cases where people are criminals because they have tumors in their brain. And when you remove the tumor, they no longer do anything.
That's right.
Criminal.
And we know that when dogs have tumors in their brains, they can bite and be vicious. But guess what? The
so it's not a choice.
Of dogs don't have tumors, and the majority of people who
Cliff, I didn't say
each other don't have tumors in their brains. They have free will, and they are able to choose.
There's still like 1,000 things you said that I want to respond to. So
no. I've allowed you to speak a lot. Now let's be honest. Let's be fair here.
I know. I'd like to be fair, but you misrepresented my position 10 times by saying you know.
No, I'm not representing your position. Okay.
You said you know.
Please don't say that. I'm not doing that.
Cliff,
I'm asking you to tell me what you believe.
Cliff, you said you know and listed a fact. You know X. That's a misrepresentation of my position. You're telling me something about my position. You got it wrong.
Fine, then tell me. Cliff, you're wrong. I don't live my life.
That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing right now. So please let me tell you why you're wrong about those things.
No, you tell me what you believe, TJump. I'm tired of hearing what theoretical.
I'm happy to tell you what I believe. First, I'm going to correct
Sure.
your misrepresentations of my position. I'll do those at
I
the
am
same
not
time.
representing your position, okay? I'm not trying to represent your position. I'm trying to have a logical discussion with you about different ideas and what is the logical conclusion of those ideas. Now, please tell us, TJump, what you believe. You're an
I've
atheist.
been
What
telling
do
you,
you believe?
I've been telling you the whole time. But when you say you know, if you ever say you know, that is a misrepresentation of someone else's
All right, I'm
position.
sorry. I apologize for using the word you know.
Thank you.
Please, TJump, tell us what you believe
About what specifically?
about all these issues. Like, why do people
Well, I want
treat you?
to focus on the determinism one that you were objecting
Okay.
to, because I think that was fascinating. And you raised something about a shooter who had a tumor in his brain.
Yeah, the Texas sharpshooter had a tumor in his brain, and that caused
power.
him to become a murderer.
Okay, right. So
Well, oh yeah, the point I was getting to with that is like, yes, this is one example where a brain is determined by a physical state to do a crime. And from that is the most extreme example. And we can go with lesser examples. We can stimulate the brain with lesser things than the brain tumor to cause the same effect. So we know that, and this is why I mentioned the consensus in neurology, cognitive science, philosophy of mind, every single one of them, except that, yeah, we're determined because all of the evidence of the brain, the physical interactions of the brain, the tumors in the brain, we can cause you to have these feelings and cause you to take these actions whether you choose to or not. So there is no choice thing there. It's not even logically consistent to say there is a choice, because it's a meaningless concept. Everything is either determined or random. So all of the evidence in all of the academic fields shows that, yes, our brains are determined by the physical states. That doesn't make it any less meaningful. It doesn't make it less moral. We don't need free will to be moral. Again, like as I said about moral naturalism, that wasn't anywhere in the definition of moral naturalism. We don't need those freeness to have morality there. We can still be determined and still have moral responsibility.
okay, so can you explain that link between moral responsibility and determinism?
The link, how does determinism explain moral responsibility? Yes.
Yeah.
So moral responsibility is essentially the act of your brain state as it is functioning without any external forces, acting in a way that it would desire, essentially. So it's if your neurology causes you to like chocolate ice cream and you go get a bar of chocolate ice cream, that's your brain acting in a morally responsible way that you have to take responsibility for those actions. So if you desire to harm people and you go out and harm people because of your brain state, which is not being impeded by some external force, then you are morally responsible for that. Your brain state, which is you, is morally responsible for that action.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand how, in that back and forth you had with Cliff, how he's positing that a free will is required for moral responsibility, and you're saying no, free will is not required in order to hold somebody accountable, responsible for their actions.
Yes. So we have a brain state, we have a bunch of neurons, and these neurons cause us to do things. And if there isn't an external force causing those neurons to act in a way that is inconsistent with their nature, then they are responsible for all the actions that brain state causes. So, for example, if I harm someone without a brain tumor, without an electrode shocking my brain, then my brain state is acting in its naturally designed way, consistent with its nature, and so my brain state is morally responsible for the actions that it takes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, a few months after Robin Williams took his life, his wife was quoted as saying that he had a terrorist in his brain. And you mentioning this Texas shooter having a tumor in his brain, there is obviously other factors at play within our consciousness. Like you're saying, you're really getting at the human brain, so relationship to the mind. Now, Robin Williams took a different turn than that Texas shooter. That Texas shooter decided to go up and start blowing people away. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Cliff is saying that Texas shooter woke up that morning and made a choice to grab his gun and go up there and start killing people. Was it a choice marred by brokenness with his tumor? Yes, but we still hold him accountable because he has a free will, right? And you're saying, no, he doesn't have a free will. He's just determined.
Right. Yeah. He's not accountable at all. Every one of his actions was caused by the tumor. He didn't do anything. There was no choice there. That was all physically caused by the tumor. So it's like, an action you take is based in chemicals in your brain. If you have too many electrical signals going to one part of your brain, you will take that action. You have no choice in it. You can't stop it. It is physically impossible because your brain is going to force your body to do it before your consciousness is even aware of it. Because we know the order in which the things happen in your brain, your subconscious decisions supersede your conscious decisions. We know that if we shock an electrode in your brain, you will have these feelings, you will do these actions, and you have absolutely no choice in it whatsoever. Robin Williams, yeah, had Alzheimer's and dementia. So he was very much like the tumor case. He wasn't responsible for killing himself. He killed himself as a way to escape the pain and suffering because of how much his brain was decaying. So for the same reason, like if you have those serious brain traumatic things screwing up your brain, you're not responsible. The brain tumor is. And we actually have legal cases where that's the case, where someone was committing very serious crimes because they had a brain tumor. They removed the brain tumor, all the crime stopped completely. And so they were just let go. They're like, yeah, you're not responsible for any of this. This was all the brain tumor. And so you're free to go. And then his brain tumor regrew and he was doing the crimes again, removed it again, all the crimes stopped. So we know for certain that this was not his choice. This is the brain tumor. And he didn't know he had a brain tumor at the time. He just had these desires and overwhelming desires to do these crimes, and forced him to do actions he had no control over. But as soon as you remove the brain tumor, he stops. He's not morally responsible. We're not going to lock him up in prison for what he did because it wasn't his fault. It was the brain tumor's fault.
Right. So we're not denying that's a physical malady and a disease of the brain that's very real, but there's still a target, a goal of rehabilitation that comes about for an individual who is doing things that we hold to be morally wrong, right? So that obviously, I hope we can all agree that Robin Williams and the Texas shooter were on different moral planes, even though they might have been suffering from the same physical malady or a similar brain malady.
I'm not sure what you mean, because I think they're the exact same. Like their actions were determined by the thing in their brain. They had no control over it. Neither of them as individuals is responsible. If we could fix the brain state, the tumor is the one that's responsible. So I would not put them on different moral planes. I put them in the exact same moral plane.
Well, I don't see how you could do that. How can you put them on the same moral plane if one is shooting a gun at other people and the other is taking his life?
Because because the Texas shooter had no choice. He made no choice there. He wasn't in control. The tumor was in control. So the one who was responsible was the tumor. And so if we remove the tumor, he would not kill anybody. He'd be fine. He'd be normal human beings. We should allow him to do that. It's not like we're going to give him treatment afterwards to say, oh, we're going to try to convince you to not kill people. Like, no, that was all the tumor. Once the tumor's gone, he's free. I mean, Sam Harris used this great example of saying if there are psychopaths, people who can't feel empathy or love or compassion and just hurt people and take whatever they need to benefit their own lives, if we could give them a pill to cure their psychopathy, then we would see psychopathy as just a disease like cancer or a cold or a flu. None of them would be responsible for their actions. It was caused by their brain. And if we could cure it, we wouldn't give them like punishment. We wouldn't put them in prison for what they did. They were victims of their brain chemistry. And if we could cure them, we just let them go and live. We wouldn't punish them further for something they had no control over.
Well, I mean, that's a noble goal of Sam Harris, and you're displaying a high level of compassion for both those individuals, of Robin Williams and the Texas shooter. But underneath that, I think there's still a reckoning that we all kind of have of our human consciousness, that we have a moral obligation to one another. And so to say that, yes, we would love to get that guy some help, sure, but if a guy is lashing out with a gun, he's on a different moral plane than a guy who is taking his own life. I mean, otherwise, it's kind of becoming a slip into the irrational. I think that Sam Harris has some nice ideas, and the atheist Stephen Hawking, he said, he's a professor. He struggled with disease. He had thoughts of euthanasia, but he said, if we came up with a theory of everything as a human species, then we would be able to have the mind of God. And how I understand that statement from him is saying my logic, the idea of the golden rule, or the idea of this reciprocity that I feel towards others when I have a loving relationship, those are all good things. And I want to intervene when there's a high level of brokenness, complex disease that is affecting a person's consciousness. I want to intervene, but eventually I can't play God. I can't decide when a life is to be taken or when it is not to be taken. Does that make sense?
Not exactly. So Stephen Hawking was using the term God there in an apocryphal sense. So it's like Einstein's use of God. It wasn't an actual God. He was just saying that we have this concept.
The maker's mind, or whatever the word is. I'm sorry to trip up on the word God.
No, he used the word God. I agree with that. But what he meant by God wasn't a conscious agent. What he meant by God was the fundamental nature of reality. So when people use the term God, what they mean is usually the fundamental nature of reality. And so when he's saying if we have a theory of everything, we have the fundamental nature of reality, he was just using the word God there as an analogy to what the fundamental nature of reality actually is, as opposed to what people normally think it is, which is a God. He wasn't actually saying there's a God. He was an atheist. Stephen Hawking was a hardcore atheist. So the many scientists use the term God in that analogical sense to be indicative of the fundamental nature of reality, the God particle. Like no one actually thought the Higgs boson was literally a God. They're just saying, they're using the word God there because it's a powerful signifier in the culture of the fundamental nature of reality, and they're using it in the same way as an analogy for that. They don't literally mean a God. So many scientists use the term God. They don't actually mean a conscious agent. I forget the.
Well, I think that the scientists, whether it's Isaac Newton or Copernicus or Kepler or Blaise Pascal, or Cliff mentioned Dr. Francis Collins, they are very specific about God. And you know,
there's
you
definitely many theists too.
That today philosophers are 70%. Well, there's a clear line of right there of scientists who are holding towards to theism, and to say that atheists borrow moral capital from the theistic position is fairly accurate when you're having a discussion here with Cliff about determinism, when you're having a discussion about free will, and how do we hold a person responsible for either doing good or doing wrong.
I'm not sure what you mean there, because I mean, most moral systems existed before any idea of free will did. Like many religions had these ideas that we were determined and you're still morally responsible for your actions way before any idea of free will came up. So we're not borrowing anything from Christianity here if you're just considering prior ideas that are similar to be borrowing.
That's not the point, TJump.
What was the point?
See, the point is exactly what I've been trying to do. Would you please stop talking about other religions or other philosophies? Just talk about what you believe and how you handle reality, TJump. How do you go on dates? How do you have a family? How do you build a friendship? You know you don't do it just based on biology and chemistry and cosmology and astronomy.
Well, I do it based off of sense experience.
Relationships where you trust and where you love and where you have integrity and where you have morals that are intangible that you hold to.
Well, no. Again, you're saying you keep saying you keep doing this. Like, no, all of my relationships are based off of sense experience and common interests and values and moral naturalism. So all of my relationships are based off of physical things, namely sense experience, moral naturalism, and the feelings I get from those.
Okay, so no person loves TJump, meaning by that, no person freely chooses to work for TJump's good. They just have to do what they do because they're simply complex robots. Right?
No person has free will towards TJump. They definitely have desires that are naturally determined for sure, but that's still love.
But what is it? What part of the person that you're dealing with who has these different desires doesn't make a choice? See, in all of my relationships with people have a lot of different desires and they have to choose between their desires, or you could call them instincts. So yes, we all have instincts and yes, we all have desires, but I would argue from my observation of my friendships that my friends make decisions about which instinct to follow, which desire to follow. Well, that clearly points us to them being more than just biological machines. They have a free will. There's a person, and that is what love is. The love does not exist as a value if we're just robots. Machines can't love. The student at MIT was dating his computer. That's tragic, really tragic. Why? because human beings are not just complex computers. We have a free will. We have personhood. We have the ability to love or to hate. I don't have to love you. I don't have to hate you.
Well, actually, you do. I mean, actually, you do. So if we stuck an electrode in your brain, I could force you to love me or force you to hate me. So those are
totally irrelevant. Obviously, we're aware that some murderers have tumors in their brain. All murderers don't have tumors in their brain. Obviously, you can change my behavior radically by sending electrical impulses through my brain. Obviously. And obviously, you can change me a lot by giving me a lobotomy. Obviously true, TJump. But that's not the way you live your life for the rest of this day. It's not the way I live my life for the rest of this day. I'm dealing with people that are not being shocked with electricity, and they don't have brain tumors. They are chemically pretty balanced on the whole. Obviously, we all have chemical imbalances to some extent.
Well, I'm not making an argument for chemical imbalance here.
There's also a me that goes beyond my chemical makeup.
Well,
and
that's
you. And we make choices to be respectful, to be disrespectful, to love, to sacrifice, or to be totally self-absorbed, narcissistic, and just be into what we're doing. That's all we're saying. And we're not straw-manning you. We're not saying this is what you believe. Nothing to do with that, TJump. It just has to do with observation of how people live their lives.
Right. So the point here is that we know that your brain makes decisions based off of the physical composition in your brain. And so everyone has a brain, and everyone has a physical composition in their brain. So all of their decisions are going to be caused by that physical composition, just like if a brain tumor was there.
No.
That's essentially, again, that's been proven universally in every academic field.
Honest. That's not been proven at all.
Yes, it has.
No, there's a difference between the brain and the mind.
There's no evidence of that. There's no one supports that in any academic field.
You cannot prove to me thoughts. You can prove to me that you got a brain. You can dissect the piece of mushy matter between my two ears. There's a brain, a physical brain. But then the thoughts, the creativity, be it art, be it music, be it ideas, be it writing a beautiful novel. TJump, that clearly points to individuality, personhood, free will.
How? No one in academia agrees with you. How does it do that? Could you publish a paper, win a Nobel Prize?
You'd agree with that.
Well, so I mean, no one.
There are so many philosophy professors who understand and have clearly articulated that if there is no God, determinism wins the day, which means we're not responsible for what we do. It's all a chemical process. Free will goes out the window. Fine. So does love.
So when I say no one, I mean the consensus.
That's all it is.
So to clarify,
a parent and a child drive to preserve the genetic pool.
So to clarify,
where does morality come from? Come on, TJump, think. Where does morality come from?
Moral naturalism. I've already answered that.
Or it comes from social contract, or it comes from self-interest, or survival of the fittest, cultural conditioning. Maybe it comes from innate dignity of people. Maybe it's just like a mathematical principle out there. But if you look at all those options, TJump, and I'd love to hear the option that you choose. Where does your understanding of right and wrong come from? All those options lead to dead ends. The way you and I live our lives is as if free will is real, which means if you are rude to me, I hold you responsible for being rude to me. If you are generous and sacrificial to me, I thank you for that free decision you made to sacrifice for me. And that's what a Christian is. A Christian is someone who says, thank you, Lord Jesus, for sacrificing your life for me, for loving me, not because you had to, but because you freely choose to.
So again, everything you said. So again, everything you said is just contrary to everything we know about science. So when I say everyone, I don't mean literally every single person.
Exactly. We've been doing this for the past hour. I didn't ask about science. I asked about you, TJump. How do you experience reality? I didn't ask.
I experience reality in the way the consensus of experts experiences reality. I go with the evidence. So I pretty much most of my positions agree with the consensus of experts because that's the best line of evidence we have. So to clarify, when I say everyone, I mean just the consensus. I don't mean literally every single human being. I mean the consensus of experts in the field.
So I get to build friendships with some of these professors you're talking about. I get to debate with them, and then I get to go and be in their home with them and have dinner with them, TJump. And they don't have dinner with their family based on a scientific postulate. They have dinner with their family based on love and trust and integrity and free will and holding their children responsible.
No, again, that's wrong. So
there was a great scientist who was very good at what he did, and he made a lot of money doing it. And he was into exactly what you've been articulating for about the past hour, that it's all about science, it's all about matter and energy and chemicals. But then his adult children began to make some very destructive decisions. And he logically talked with his adult children and tried to persuade them to stop these destructive habits that were destroying their lives, destroying the lives of their family members. And he couldn't persuade them to change. And suddenly he began to realize, my faith in science, my reducing all of reality to a scientific formula and formulas, is impotent and bankrupt. Why? Because what means most to me in life is not a scientific formula. What means most to me in life are my relationships with my children. And all of a sudden, he began to see that his atheism was bankrupt, because consistently with his atheism and his science, he couldn't have a relationship. And people do have free will. And the people that meant most to him, his family members, were destroying their lives. And logically, he couldn't persuade them to change. And all of a sudden, he began to realize the pain, the emptiness of my life is overwhelming. Relationships, TJump, are far more important than chemical reactions in the human brain. It's that simple.
Yeah, but none of that supports your position. So every scientist I talked about,
it all supports it totally.
No, none of it does. Nothing you said supports anything, any of the conclusions you made.
Agree. But all that I say does not agree with your presupposition of naturalism and materialism.
I never had a presupposition of naturalism.
So remember where I started, TJump.
Cliff, you're misrepresenting my position. Cliff, you're misrepresenting my position again.
Or disprove God.
Cliff, you're misrepresenting my position again.
Outside of material reality.
Cliff, you're misrepresenting my position again. So no, nowhere in anything I said presupposed naturalism or any. I have no presupposition.
You said you're a naturalist.
Yes, that doesn't presuppose naturalism. So nothing I said presupposed naturalism ever. Nothing I said. Naturalism is a conclusion based on the evidence, nothing more. And again, yes, all scientists have relationships. I have relationships. Does that mean there's non-physical things there, free will there? No. All of that is explained by naturalism. Saying that, well, it's made of supernatural stuff or made of natural stuff doesn't change that it's still a relationship. It doesn't make it any less valid. Love is still love, whether it's determined by physical processes or whether it's a supernatural process. It's still a process.
No,
makes no difference.
Determined by chemicals, it's not love. It is a programmed response. When I use the word love, I am talking about a free decision to work for the well-being of someone else.
So you've made up a new category that doesn't exist.
To throw her body in front of an oncoming car in order to protect her child. And I would argue that's a free decision. She doesn't have to do that. And I know that from experience. I don't have to love my wife. I don't have to love my children. And I don't have to love you, TJump. I make a decision. And to reduce my decision to a chemical reaction, I think is a tragic reduction of reality. It's not the life that I experience. It's not the life that I enjoy.
Right. That's because you have some kind of weird preconditioned desire for supernatural things. It doesn't matter. All of these feelings.
No, it's because I observed my experience, and my experience is love is real.
That's
it's not
what I said.
It's not coerced.
So whether you think the feelings you have, like we all agree that these are feelings we have. We have love.
No,
we have
they're not feelings we have. It's a decision. At times I feel like hating, TJump. You don't listen to me. At times I feel like hating people.
Okay.
I choose not to follow that instinct. I choose instead to make a decision of the will to love and to forgive when I feel like getting revenge.
Okay.
I feel like cutting the knees out from underneath a person. Instead of choosing that instinct, I choose instead to love. It is not a feeling. It is
okay.
a decision of my will to love.
You can call it whatever you want.
I promise you, I don't feel like loving my enemy.
Okay.
And if a person hurts me deeply enough, I don't feel like forgiving them. It's the last thing I feel like doing.
This wasn't my point. This wasn't relevant to my point.
I feel like revenge. That's what I feel like.
Okay, this wasn't relevant to my point. You can call it whatever you want. We all agree that love exists. We all agree that relationships exist.
No, we disagree on the definition of love.
That's fine. That's fine. You can disagree on that. Every person who's watching this agrees that love exists. All the scientists agree that love exists. We all think this is real. You want to think it's made of supernatural stuff. We think it's made of natural stuff.
Never once did I say supernatural. That's not what I said. You're not listening.
Well, maybe
I said instead.
Can I finish?
Let me finish my ability to choose.
Let me finish my point.
Well, to work for the well-being of someone else.
Let me finish my point. So theists think that love and spirit and free will and choices are all made of some kind of supernatural something. I don't know what they think. Whatever.
No. I'm not saying that love is a supernatural substance. Never once have I said that. Never once have I thought that.
Supernatural means not natural. So you can think it's not natural, right? It's not fully natural, determined stuff, right?
Love is the ability that we human beings have innately to work for the well-being of someone else. I observe
it natural
every day.
Is it natural?
Hatred is not something I have to do. It's a
Cliff.
decision I make to hate and to demean another human being.
Cliff, is it natural? Is it natural?
What do you mean when you say natural?
Physical, determined by physical forces. Is it natural?
No.
Okay, so it's supernatural.
Someone is not natural in the sense that it's a biological drive that makes.
Okay, that means it's supernatural. So supernatural means not natural. It's above the natural.
No.
Maybe Cliff is asking you, what's your definition of supernatural, TJump?
Not natural. So you have the natural stuff, and then you have the not natural stuff.
Sorry, supernatural is not negative. It's not a negative term in the same way that evil is not just in the negative. Evil is the absence of good. Evil is not a physical entity. In the same way, love is not a physical
Come on,
entity.
T-Jump.
I'm fine with that.
Hear me, and I said right from the start, tangible and intangible.
Okay.
Physical, non-physical. And my observation of reality is that there's a lot of intangibles that are part of reality.
So
tangibles.
So love is not natural, right?
A lot of non-physical reality.
Okay, non-physical, non-natural, whatever. So there's these two options. Love is real, and then the determinist thinks it's a natural thing, and you think it's a non-natural thing.
The determinist says that love is a chemical reaction or a result of environment.
Natural thing, yes. Those would be natural things, Cliff. So
and it would be natural. And I'm arguing, but my whole argument, T-Jump, is it is natural for us human beings to love.
Okay.
So the question becomes, where does that natural ability come from?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Equation, it comes from matter and energy, which drives you right back into determinism.
Okay, I'm still haven't gotten my point yet. Still haven't gotten my point. So yes, the determinist thinks that love is natural. The theist thinks it's non-natural. It doesn't matter. Either way, love is love. Love isn't any less love, whether it's natural or non-natural. Makes no difference. It's still real. It's still equally as real in either case. Makes zero difference. So yes, the naturalist thinks that love and choices exist, but they're made of natural stuff. You think they're made of not natural stuff. It makes no difference. It's not less real because you think it's made because it's.
That was not what I said. What I said was, we have a physical brain. We also have thoughts that are non-physical, non-material. Part of love is a physical drive. Part of hatred is a physical drive, but also part of love is a free will, which is non-physical, not tangible. It's intangible.
Right. So I'm agreeing with your position here.
For me, who chooses not to hate, although I want to hate, and I have an instinct to hate, I choose not to follow that instinct. Instead, I choose to follow the instinct to care about someone and to love them.
Okay, so there's two options here. Love exists. We all agree love exists. No, you think love is a non-natural thing. We think love is a natural thing.
False. That's a false dichotomy you're setting up.
What?
It's not my point. You've misunderstood my point totally.
What? So we both agree love exists. You think love is a non-physical thing. Is that misrepresenting your point?
Yes.
How?
I am convinced that you, as a natural human being, as a physical human being, are not just physical.
Yes.
You have a soul. You also have the ability to love. You also have a free will. You also have an ability to understand meaning and purpose in life. And these are real.
Right.
Although they're intangible, they're not physical, they're not natural in that sense.
That's what I said.
They're very real.
That's what I said. So I said, we both agree that all these things you listed exist. We both agree. You think they're non-physical. I think they're physical.
I think they're both physical and non-physical. I said we have an instinct to love. We have an instinct to hate. But we also have a free will, and we choose whether to love or to hate.
Okay. We think they're entirely physical. You think they're partially non-physical.
Thank you.
Okay. So those are the two possibilities. But all of those things exist either way. It makes no difference if they're partially non-physical or if they're fully physical. What?
That's been my whole point, T-Jump. Now we're finally hopefully getting to understanding of each other. My point is your experience of reality, I hope, I don't know, is similar to my experience of reality. And I know that in my experience of reality, I don't have to love, I don't have to hate. I choose. And guess what? I know that Robert doesn't have to love. He doesn't have to hate. That's why I hold him responsible for when he loves. I also hold him responsible for when he hates, because he has a free will, I'm convinced.
Okay,
That's the way I live my life. When he hates, I don't look at him in the face and say, Robert, I understand that the chemical reactions in your brain cause you to hate. No problem. When he chooses revenge, I don't say to him, Robert, I understand you had to seek revenge because the chemical reactions in your brain programmed you to seek revenge. I don't live my life that way. I live my life because I'm convinced he has instincts, but I'm also convinced that there's a soul, a free will, a person who makes decisions.
Okay, I'm still trying to get to my point here. So we both agree all of these things you listed exist. You think they're partially non-physical. We think they're fully physical. It makes no difference. They all equally exist, whether they're partially non-physical or whether they're fully physical. They all equally exist either way. So in naturalism, all of those things are equally as real and equally have the same properties as whether or not you add this non-physical part to them, that you don't need this non-physical part. It does nothing. It doesn't make them better. It doesn't make them more real. They're still equally as real and have equally as much weight, purely made of just physical stuff. There's no difference there. It's not like saying, well, they're partially non-physical. It adds nothing to them. It doesn't make love better if it's partially non-physical. If love is fully physical, it's still equally as love.
All right, I'll try once more, TJump. One more time, I'll try, and I'll maybe I just need to go back to junior high and learn how to communicate better.
Well, this was my point.
In reality,
I couldn't figure out what his point was.
If in reality he is simply chemicals, then when he says to me, Dad, I love you, what he really means is my chemicals are programming me to, quote, love you. In other words, he has a totally different definition of love. His definition of love is an instinct that he has to follow. That is not what I mean when I say love. When I say love, what I mean is he could hate me. He could be apathetic towards me. But for some reason that I can't comprehend, I realize I am so blessed that he chooses, freely chooses, not because I brainwashed him, not because the environment he grew up in forces him to love me. He chooses freely to love me. And I can promise you, TJump, when I dated my wife, I was over the moon excited when she looked me in the face and said, I love you. Because what she meant was not, well, Cliff, you got a big bank account, so I think it'd be cool to hang with you. She did not mean, Cliff, something, because you turned me on sexually, I think I want to go to bed with you. She did not mean, something, Cliff, because you are a famous guy, I think I want to hang with you. No, she meant, Cliff, I choose to truly care about you, the real you that I've gotten to know over a period of time. And I really love you. TJump, that's what makes my life go round and round. Now, if it's true what you say, that no, my wife, my fiance simply had a sex drive or a drive for financial security or a drive to have someone provide for her materially. And if all she meant was, something, Cliff, I have to love you because I got to survive, and so you're the best option, so I love you. See, that's radically different. It's a radically different worldview, TJump. And to say that we mean the same thing when we say love, TJump, that's what I'm objecting to. I'm saying we don't mean the same thing, TJump. We mean something radically different when we talk about love. Does that make any sense?
No, because we're saying they're made of different things. Saying they're made of different things.
TJump. Oh. Come on, TJump. You're smarter than that. You know the difference I'm talking about, don't you?
No, I understand what you think the difference is. And the whole point I'm trying to make is that that's not a difference. So saying that you're saying that, well, it has to be made of a supernatural thing to be special.
I didn't say that once in the past soliloquy I just gave. I didn't bring in the supernatural once. So why are you adding it? I just said my experience.
Supernatural is my term. Supernatural is my term for non-physical stuff. It's just my go-to term by habit. So I don't mean to say you said supernatural there. So my point here is saying that anything you think exists supernaturally can exist just physical. So if you think free will can exist non-physically, it can exist physically.
There is a free will if there is just matter and energy.
Right. That's right there. Right there is what I've been.
We agree. We don't agree.
No. So what I'm saying here is that you think to have this special thing of free will, it needs to be non-physical. That's wrong. So we can have free will and have it be purely physical. That's possible too.
How's that possible?
Wait. So just let me finish my point here. So the claim that you're making is that by making it a non-physical thing, what I would call supernatural, you've added this special property that it can get that it can't get physically. That's the problem here, because anything that you can get supernaturally, you can get physically. Anything the supernatural or non-physical can explain, the physical can explain. So there is nothing that you get by saying adding the supernatural in. This doesn't add anything to love or free will or any of those things. All of those things are equally as real and equally as powerful and morally responsible if they're just physical than if they're supernatural. Saying you add in this new property that is non-physical property does nothing to them. They're still equally as real. So all of the scientists who believe in love think it's equally as real, but just made of physical stuff. The fact that you define it differently and add this free will thing into it makes no difference. It's not more real because you have this supernatural, non-physical part to it.
You're right.
It's
an issue of what is the best, most reasonable, most plausible explanation of reality. That's the issue.
Yes, and science gives us that.
No way.
There's explanatory. I think you guys are both agreeing on that. There's explanatory power in both science and what Cliff was talking about in regards to free will and love, and how we understand love. And obviously, he's holding to that. Ultimately, God is love, and that is shown in the person of Jesus, and that's changed history. And obviously, we're looking at it from a perspective of causality, of like, what's the cause of this notion of love, or this idea of justice, or this reality that we're living in? Where's the explanatory power of what we're holding to?
Well, sure. Like explanatory power and explanatory scope work in very simple ways. Like explanatory power is just, can the hypothesis explain the data? And essentially you can get any hypothesis to explain the data. You can have magical pixies explain everything. So explanatory power is really easy. The predictive power is the thing that matters. So even if you have explanatory power, and every hypothesis has explanatory power, which is called the problem of underdetermination, unless you can translate that into predictive power or some way to differentiate it from imaginary, then it doesn't do anything. So the reason, like as a physicalist, I can just grant we have free will. I can say, yep, free will is real, but it's purely physical. It's a process and a physical thing we just haven't discovered yet. So I can say all of the things that you guys believe in are just physical things, and they exist equally as real without the supernatural. Or the non-physical. So saying that they're non-physical does nothing. It doesn't give you any explanatory power. You just added an extra thing that does not accomplish anything. And the reason you seem to be adding that is because you can't imagine how these things could exist physically. But not imagining how they could explain physically doesn't explain how they could exist non-physically either. So the problem here is that saying that free will and love and compassion and choices all exist as a non-physical thing is not an explanation. It doesn't give you any explanatory power at all. Just like me saying that free will is physical doesn't give me any explanatory power, because I haven't explained how. You would need to explain how, as a non-physical thing, these things exist and have some causal influence over the world. Not just saying, well, I feel it based on my intuition. That's not an argument. That's not evidence of anything. That's just a feeling. So we can equally say that these things exist just physically and we don't know how, just like you say they exist non-physically as some new realm that we haven't discovered yet. It doesn't add any explanatory power to say these things exist non-physically any more than it does to say they exist physically.
Well, why do you place such a high premium on this term predictive power? Is it not to reduce the risks that you see around you in your life? Is it not to think through how do relationships work, or how do things like a concept such as meaning, like having a meaningful life? We want some predictive power, don't we? So what is this term predictive power that you're talking about?
Well, predictive power is a way to differentiate imagination from reality. It's a reliable way to do so. It doesn't have anything to do with relationships.
Okay,
Exactly.
well, what's real is that which doesn't go away, right? That has a level of permanence to it.
No, like the stars are real, but they go away. I don't know what you mean.
Well, this you keep going to this concept of love, and you guys were talking about love. That it's a permanent ideal. It's real, and we distinguish it from hate. You know, the atheist philosopher Bertrand Russell said, "Love is wise, hate is foolish." That's a pretty qualitative declaration of two concepts that kind of it would seem that the atheist has more of a hard time finding any sort of explanatory power for why that statement that Bertrand Russell made is even comprehensible.
I have no idea what you mean there. So again, any explanation you can make that is a non-physical supernatural explanation can be made physically. Anything the non-physical can explain, the natural physical can explain. You can just say that if you think free will is real, then I can say free will is a physical thing we haven't discovered yet, a physical law of nature we haven't discovered yet. So
Well,
anything
we're
that
kind of crossing our wires here regarding, once again, I'm going back to this issue of causality, this scientific principle of causality, that an effect it cannot be greater than its cause. If we see that there is love and hate in the world, and we see these ideals of justice and injustice, then we have to think about causality. Is this something that we as human beings just came up with? Or is there something outside of us, an objective standard outside of us, that is a universal absolute?
So that would go back into my original response. That's a composition division fallacy. But I'd like, if you could find me a paper on this law of causality thing, I'd really appreciate it, because I've never seen it in any paper in physics or philosophy or anywhere. I think it's usually just a heuristic. I've seen no such principle or law.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes from that notion of from nothing comes nothing.
We agree.
Why are we having this conversation in the first place? Obviously, the topic is, where is the evidence for God? And we've had, quite a bit of back and forth on it. And I'd love to get you a paper on the scientific principle of causality.
Yeah, because I've never seen that anywhere in science ever. In all of the papers I've written and all the laws I've seen, the 4 laws of thermodynamics, all the different laws of Newton's laws, I've never seen this law anywhere.
Causality is kind of about observation. It's tied into cosmology. Causality is this notion of a term like inertia. Do you really think that causality is a term that's not scientific?
I know what the term is, but there's no law in science of causality. It's a heuristic to describe change, essentially. But there's no law anywhere in science of the law of causality, or the principle of causality, as far as I know. So the point I'm making here is there are laws in physics, like the laws of thermodynamics. Those are real laws. Causality isn't a law. Causality is a heuristic. We're describing other things that exist. It's an abstract concept. So, but my point here is that we all agree nothing comes from nothing. That's something we totally agree with. No one thinks that there was a literal nothing. Lawrence Krauss, who said the universe came from nothing, doesn't mean an actual nothing. Not even he thinks that everything came from nothing. But the argument here is that no matter what you think exists, to have causal power that you're describing, you need to have some way to show that this new thing you're saying exists, to have causal power, can actually have an influence over what you're describing. So, for example, if you say that free will is a non-physical thing, you would have to show that this non-physical quality of stuff exists independent of our imagination. That's why you need the predictive power. And we can show the physical stuff exists independent of our imagination. So it has very good causal power and predictive power. So it's much more reasonable to think that the stuff that we know of, like free will, love, whatever, is a combination of those things that we've shown exist independent of our imagination. And if you're just saying that there's this non-physical stuff that you feel intuitively, and this is what's causing it, well, you'd need that extra step of showing that this isn't just in your imagination, or it has no explanatory power. It's not a good explanation, because you can't show it's not imaginary. And that's why we go with the physical stuff. That's why we say that our love is a chemical reaction in the brain, because that's what we've shown exists independent of our imagination. And until you can show that there is some alternative that exists equally as independent of our imagination, you can't say it has explanatory power. It's just something you've imagined, a hypothesis. And that's the problem here, is that when we're scientists, we can say that love and free will exist physically. We just haven't discovered it yet. We can say that. It has no explanatory power because we have no way to show It exists independent of our imagination. But the same is true for saying it's non-physical. Until
Right.
you can
I take what you're saying, and thank you for coming on and sharing with us today. I think we really appreciate it.
Thank you, TJump.
This conversation has been really challenging and
Yes.
expanding our thoughts about it, because I think that, you know, to have this back and forth really helps both of us, and I hope it helps you too. Consider, okay, where's the explanatory power behind why is there life? Why is there something instead of nothing? And to think through that question, where is the evidence for God? I think so often we've talked about causality. Uh, we have a longing for meaning and purpose and direction, and I just would say that this is kind of a phenomena of anthropology, but this notion of eternity. Um, being something that we have across cultures, across people groups. Um, Obviously, we're both looking for what's the evidence for the eternal being real. And we've obviously kind of held to a theistic position that there is a eternal God behind the notion of eternity that we have, as shown clearly in the person of Jesus. And from that, we kind of have a blueprint for ways in which we can move forward with this messy, sticky stuff called relationships in our lives that can be so difficult sometimes, but also very rewarding. So thank you so much. I hope this conversation can continue, and that we can continue to grow a relationship with you, TJump, in talking about the different arguments for and against where is the evidence for the existence of God. So
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for talking with me again, Cliff. It was nice talking with you guys. Are you Stewart's brother?
you guessed it. You guessed it.
Can you believe it, TJump? We just keep on multiplying.
So when I first came on, I saw you on the little screen. I was like, is that Stewart? And then I zoomed out, like, wait a minute, there's a difference here.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah.
TJump, thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight to talk with you. To be honest with you, TJump, to be able to talk with you more one-on-one has been a real privilege. So
Absolutely.
thank
Thanks
you
for
so
coming
much
on.
for
Thanks for
taking
having
the
me
time.
on. Love talking with you guys. Nice talking with you again, Cliff. Hopefully we can do some more in the future.
We'd like that a lot, TJump. Thank you so much. Happy New Year to you, man.
You too. See you guys
All right.
later.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Test everything. Hold on to the good. Peace.